Welcome to Pastoring on Purpose. I am Dr. Manis. I am the Pastoral Care and Spirit Care Coordinator here at Ministerial Care, and we are bringing you into our offices here and into, more specifically, our studios from Cleveland, Tennessee. To my right is my colleague, Dr. Jeff Sargent. Jeff, say hello to everybody out there today.
Hello to everyone. It's good to be back in the studio. Good to be back here in these offices. This is a beautiful facility you guys have here.
Well, thank you. And it always does feel good to kind of be in our own studio. And we have a really special episode for you today. On this episode, we're going to be discussing spouses and ministry with Lorna and Raymond Birch. And so you definitely want to be here with us for this. But before we get into this episode, we're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about boundaries and counseling, and specifically to pastors, and some of the things our pastors may be going through right now, and so you're definitely going to want to be here for this episode as we talk about these really vital topics for our ministers and the people out there listening, whether you're Church of God or part of a different denomination, a leader, or even just laity. We want to welcome you into this episode. Joining us via Zoom, by the way, we have Lorna and Raymond Birch with us. Lorna has a passion for teaching the gospel, mentoring, especially women who are in ministry. She has also written a book entitled Leading Ladies, which you can check out on Amazon. I fully support. This is an excellent read, by the way. Pastor Raymond Birch is a pastor, leader, mentor, and has served and is currently serving, as a matter of fact, as the administrative bishop for the Church of God in the state of New Jersey. Welcome to both of you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you both. This is an amazing opportunity.
What an honor and privilege it is.
Well, we're really excited to have both of you with us. And quite frankly, it's our guest that makes this podcast what it is. It's not us.
Certainly not.
I know that people are not tuning in to listen to my voice, and they're certainly not tuning in to see me, and so because there's not much to look at. But Lorna and Raymond have earned master's degree in theology, and they hold certification in marriage and family counseling, and that's definitely something we want to get into in just a moment. But Lorna, let's just kind of first jump into the conversation with the question for you, if that's okay. What does it mean? This is kind of a loaded question, and you answer this however you want to, obviously, but what's it mean to be a pastor's wife in the 21st century?
Wow. The word that comes in my spirit is flexibility.
Wow.
And you have to be flexible. You have to be open to what the Lord is calling us to do in this hour as a pastor's wife, because there's such a need for the wife to shift out of what maybe the traditional pastor's wife look like into what the world needs right now. And they need to see women that are free to be what God's calling them to be, whatever that may look like, because every pastor's wife, every woman has a different anointing, a different call on their life, a different assignment alongside her husband. So everybody's not going to sing and everybody's not going to preach, but you got to be the best version of you that you can be, and be flexible and shift out of what you thought pastors' wives need to be, because we really need to be in our place doing what God called us to do now like never before.
That's excellent, because you're really talking a lot about identity.
Yes.
Right. Knowing who you are, being comfortable in your own skin, being comfortable and really confident in the calling that God has for specifically you in your life, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's so important to identify with someone that may be already walking in that and connect with them, whatever that assignment on your life may look like, because you're going to feel like, okay, mine is different from I'm not Lorna, I'm not who Lorna is, because Lorna does preach, or Lorna does sing and preach. Lorna does this and that. But if you're a pastor's wife, you need to find you might need to find somebody that may kind of look like your call, but you need to and talk with them about it and get wisdom on how to do it. I think a lot of times we're not shifting because we're not connecting.
Wow.
You got to find other people that are free enough to help you find your place too. And we do a lot of what we do in isolation. And I think that hinders so many women because you don't reach out. And that was the key for me, was connecting with other women that were free and flexible, and me finding who I am in that.
So, Lorna, what I'm hearing you say is there's no one way to be a pastor's wife or a woman in ministry, all right? It's a discovery, right? So I also heard you reference that in the past there were expectations that you don't necessarily have to be tied to the past, all right? Nor do you have to follow a current model or expectation of others. It's a self-discovery when you accept this call as a wife in ministry or a spouse in ministry. And also what I'm hearing you say is that this discovery should not be alone, all right? You should seek out a mentor, all right, or mentors who are already established themselves as women in ministry to help guide you through this discovery, correct?
Yes.
Would you tell us a little bit about yours? I don't want to make you feel like you have to be too personal, but could you tell us a little bit about your discovery or your journey to discovering who you are as a woman in ministry?
Absolutely. First of all, my husband was the catalyst of me stepping into what God called for me to do. But in the midst of it, I did see so many stereotypes, so many expectations that I then put on myself. When we first went into full-time ministry as lead pastors, we followed a pastor and wife that had been there for 17 years doing traditional ministry and doing everything. The pastor's wife did everything. She cleaned the church. She was the church choir leader. She did, I'm telling you, everything. And I walked into that ministry thinking, well, I need to be superwoman too. And my husband and I was spinning all the plates of the ministry. And my husband, I had a come to Jesus moment on a dark road back in South Georgia. We were driving from a ministry engagement. We were having this conversation. And my husband basically saw that I was in a bondage to what the people thought, what my expectations were. And we really he dealt with that. He helped me to see. And it was a stronghold that I had, because you go into ministry, you think, okay, I'm supposed to do all these things, but and I had to find what God wanted me to do. And literally that night we got to the house and I just went up to my prayer room that we had at our house and just lay before the Lord and say, Lord, I've totally missed this. I've totally lost myself in the ministry. And then I wasn't effective to my husband. I wasn't effective to my children, because I started running, doing what everybody thought. And so basically the Lord just gave me a strategy on how to do what he called me to do. And my husband, this is what really shocked me. He said, let it fall. The plate you're spinning, it's not working. You need to let it fall. And I was like, being a type A person, I was like, how do you let things fall? He said, if you are spinning all these plates doing everything, nobody knows where you need help. Nobody's going to come alongside you and help you because you look like you've got it all together. He said, let it fall. And it was hard. It was hard for me, but I really had to do that. And then, you know what? God sent help. God sent what I needed, but I had to find what God called for me to do, to be the best helpmate that I was called to be for him, and relax in that and let God do the work at what he wanted me to do. And basically what he told me to do was humble myself, find out how my husband needed me, ask him, honey, what do you need me to do? And when he told me what he needed me to do, and I started doing that, it's like then the Lord began to lift me up and elevate me in different areas. And that's, where the book came and all of that, because it's like when you have to try to fight for what you want in the ministry, you're really not flowing with God. But if you have to force it, it's not God. But when I began to relax and rest in the call alongside my husband, then the Lord could trust me with what he wanted to do in my life and through my life. If that makes sense. I hope I'm saying that right. But then I found my identity. Then I was free to do. And then my husband then could trust me in what God called for me to do, because he knew I wasn't going to kill myself, basically,
What you're saying is powerful, because you are saying confidently that you trusted God and your relationship with your husband, all right, to develop and allow this identity that God was calling you or has called you to evolve and to develop. And that is really quite remarkable. It really is. And I think the number of men and women who will hear this will be very encouraging, because so often in ministry, whether you're the pastor, lead pastor, co-pastoring, pastor's spouse, there are these expectations that others have, and they preconceive, or they have this preconceived idea of what our identity should be. And we feel that. We feel the pressure to conform to that. And what you're saying is, no, that's not what we should do. We should follow the calling that's within us and share that calling with the spouse that God has given us. And what a beautiful model they have.
Absolutely. And I just kind of want to, if you're interested in what we're discussing today, definitely pick up Lorna Birch's book, Leading Ladies, because you talk about that journey that you're on and trying to spin those plates and trying to do everything and kind of trying to conform to what everyone else's ideology or what they want you to do. And I want to just follow up that with you, Bishop Birch, in talking about, oftentimes we think about the female supporting the husband. We don't think about sometimes about what we need to do as men to support our wives and be there for them, to be able to help them fulfill the calling they have. What did you do, and particularly in that time when Lorna was trying to find herself, when she was trying to do too much? How did you, as her husband, provide the support that she needed during that time to help her through that process?
Absolutely. Well, great question. For me, the thought was why. I kept asking her why. As I saw her doing all these things, I began to see the frustration, because you can spin plates that are not yours and they'll just frustrate you. And she would constantly complain about certain areas. And I began to ask her, well, why are you doing them? And her thought was, I need to do them so that the ministry can be successful. And immediately it was like the Holy Spirit stopped me and said, we don't control the success of ministry. He does. And so I said, you've got to stop doing all these things and allow him the privilege to make the success that he wants through our lives. And so I had that moment with her to communicate to her, I believe in you and I believe you can do ministry. You just got to find what God is calling you to do and allow everything else to fall to the side. And I said, if you let the plate fall, someone will pick it up and run with it. And I began to watch her over the next few months, just begin to just do what God was calling her to do, find where God wanted her to minister at, and to encourage her in those areas to say, hey, you did a great job here. Here's a recommendation so that you don't get distracted by maybe the other place that are spinning, because when you release something, you always want to try to take a look at it to see if anyone is actually doing it the way you would do it. And I said, it's not about them doing it the way you're doing it, as long as it gets done. And it may not get done in an excellent way that you may want it, but this is a training for a future. So allow them to make mistakes. It's okay if people make mistakes in church, as long as it doesn't cause a sinner to fall away from God or not come to God, and as long as it doesn't cause the kingdom a financial or a moral failure, then allow people to grow. And so she began to take her expectations off of what and how they did it, as long as it got done, and just focused in on what God was calling her to do. And I just encouraged her along the way to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep going. And there was moments where she would try to slip back into grabbing a task. And I said, hold on. Why are you grabbing that? You remember God has already released you from that. And so I would constantly encourage her to stay in her lanes, focus in on your calling, and watch God take care of the rest that is going on around us.
If I can add as well, my husband pastored me. I think a lot of times he pastors me, even still. I think a lot of times we get into ministry and we forget that there's still a responsibility, especially for men, to pastor their wives.
Yeah.
So many men don't have that freedom to speak to their wives because of the wrath of what may come, because they, are speaking the truth, even though they speak the truth in love. I see so many pastors that their wives are way out there, but they're not able to help their wives. You still have to pastor your wives, and what we do is when we go off on a regular, every 3 months, we do an evaluation and we ask, how am I doing as a wife? And he asked me, how am I doing as a husband? And we have to evaluate, have we allowed ministry to take over? Have we allowed, where am I focused in on you, honey? That I think that's the key for our marriage, why we've been able to balance the ministry and have a healthy marriage.
And that thought came from Songs of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 9. As I was reading through the Bible, Songs of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 9 stood out to me. And Solomon kept using this words over and over. He kept saying, my sister, my bride, my sister, my bride. And I said, wow, I have a responsibility to not only love her as a bride, but to mentor and pastor her as a sister in the church. And so I had to go away in my prayer time and just begin to ask the Lord, what does it look like to have that dynamic dual role in the lives of a minister? And so I may have that scripture may have been taken out of context, but it was illuminated to me, and revelation came that she's my wife, she's my bride, but she's my sister. And so I have to pastor her as well as love her as a wife, and to try to do both of those simultaneously to see her advance in the kingdom.
Wow. And I think for our listeners out there that's listening out there, there's quite a few things I want you to really pick up on. What the Birches are saying here is you don't have to be perfect, right? We're trying to figure this out as we go. Sometimes we get into ministry, we feel like we have to have it all figured out. We have to have all the answers. We have to know what we're doing. And let's be honest, ministry is very difficult. All the times we get into ministry, we have no clue as to what we're doing. That's why we have to rely upon our community, our church, and our Savior and the Holy Spirit. Right, Jeff?
Yes. I tell you, I'm really impressed and encouraged by the model that the Birches are presenting here. I mean, what I see, a couple things, and I could unpack this. This is a lot to unpack. I know. So we don't have time. We don't have time to do that. But I'll take a couple of points here that come to mind as I was listening to Raymond respond to the question. Is that, first of all, I see two individuals who have accepted their calling and what God is calling them to do in their ministry, and they feel confident in that. The confidence that God has called me to do this, and I have a unique set of skills and a unique calling, and they've accepted that first. That right there allows them to trust the other, their spouse, all right, and not feel threatened by their ministry. I don't hear anybody feeling threatened like, oh, hold it, well, you're my spouse and I don't need you to get in the way of the ministry or what I'm trying to do or what God's called me to do. I hear them trusting each other, but that confidence starts with their confidence in their calling with Christ as individuals, all right, their ministry, which allows them to have confidence and not feel threatened by the other in their marriage. And I hear that working together beautifully.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the fact that, like you said, it's as iron sharpens iron, that starts in the marital covenant. And you are there to support, to help, to pray for, to be with. And I love what you guys talk, because we often talk about in ministry is evaluating our church and evaluating our progress as a leader and what we're doing. I love the idea, and this is something we all should be doing in our marriages, is evaluating our marriages. What can we do better? How can we improve? What am I missing that I need my spouse to kind of speak into my life? I love that model that you guys have shared.
I like that it's 3 months. I didn't even think about it. Usually my wife and I will have that type of discussion on our anniversary, all right, because that's when you're thinking and reflecting. But you're saying, no, or at least you're implying, maybe 3 months rather than waiting every 12 months to evaluate and talk and discuss. Yes, I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely. So we actually just ask each other, how am I doing as a spouse? How am I doing as a husband? Because what we realize is success in ministry doesn't necessarily transfer to the marriage or even to the home. And so not only do we have that conversation with each other, but with our kids, children, we wanted to ask them, how am I doing as a father? Because sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the success or failures of ministry that we visit them on each other. And so I wanted to be a good husband, not just a good husband in general, but a good husband to my wife. So I ask her the questions, how am I doing as a husband for you? Because you can also just be a good husband in the eyes of evaluating yourself based on others who do what we do. You can say, oh, well, at least I don't, treat my wife this way or that way. So you begin to self-evaluate and think, I'm doing better than that pastor down the street, or I spend more time with my family than that pastor over across the country. And so your success of being just a husband actually is graded upon others rather than on your spouse. So I looked her in the eyes and said, how am I doing as your husband? What can I change? What can I grow in? And we just have those truthful conversations to pastor and mentor each other in marriage. And so we've had learning experiences and work to get better at being what we needed to be for each other.
Yes, because you know what? This is one thing. Ministry can end tomorrow, but your marriage is supposed to last until Jesus comes. And so that's what we keep, that reality right there. Ministry is not, this is what's supposed to last forever. So we are very careful because God put us together, and ministry is not going to take us apart from each other.
Love it. Love it. And I think, sometimes we have to ask the hard questions, and we have to ask our spouse the hard questions. And sometimes we don't like some of those answers, but let's be honest. We need that. And I really do appreciate you all talking about this and really being so open about your relationship with one another and our struggles. We have to, I feel like we have to normalize a little bit that, we're not called to just we don't have to have it all figured out as we get called. And this is a journey that we're on. And sometimes I feel like as ministers of the gospel, we have to, like you said, wear a lot of different hats or balance a lot of different plates. And that's not necessarily the case. And so let me just kind of just shift a little bit, because I feel like having you guys on, I need to ask this question, because serving as the bishop in the state of New Jersey, what are some of the things that and either of you can start with this, but this is for both of you. What are some of the things you guys are seeing that our ministers might be struggling with, going through? Is there anything, is there like a trend out there that you guys are kind of seeing that, or maybe some things that some of the success stories, maybe there's some success stories that you guys are seeing and want to talk about. What are some of the things that we're seeing out there on the field?
Let's start that.
I don't know, Doctor. I'm telling you, the biggest issue that we see is that they're too busy for each other, and they're not having intimacy.
Wow.
Yeah. They're not spending that quality time together on purpose. One of the things for me is I learned early in ministry to schedule my calendar and to schedule our personal time, to be intentional about blocking off time on the calendar for each other. And many people just allow ministry to kind of be scheduled, but marriage to accidentally happen. Mm-hmm. And so we have patterned our ministry after what we believe the Lord wanted us to do. And most pastors would take off on Mondays to recuperate from ministry. Well, I take off on Fridays. We take off on Fridays so that we can build marriage. So you don't have a normal weekend in ministry for the most part, because Saturday is spent in preparation for Sunday. And so you don't have a weekend. So we intentionally shut the office on Fridays and have Fridays and Saturdays as a weekend time, a relaxation time. And so we don't have to feel burnt out on Monday to have to recuperate and spend all your time. You don't want to do anything because of ministry. So we intentionally schedule our Fridays. And it's been so great to be honored in that area. Many of the pastors know that about us. We communicated that, and they honor our Fridays as our time of marriage to build our marriage. We made it clear to them that, hey, we're available, if it's an emergency, but if it's not an emergency, we want to build our marriage on Fridays. And so we just try to encourage the pastors to intentionally spend that time, schedule that time. And if something happens on a Friday where you have a change or a shift that you have to minister, then schedule another day off during the week. It's okay to schedule a moment of time where you intentionally spend time building your marriage, evaluating your marriage. And so on the field, we watch the pastors give their focus to ministry from 5 a.m. to sometimes all the way through the evening, different ministry events. And I watch, you can just look, 2020 was a open reflection of what the priorities were. When you look through social media, you see everyone was posting about their ministry. Few people were posting about building their marriage, getting out and intentionally taking that time. And so we just had to go back and say, hey, listen, the reason why many churches are struggling because they don't have their marriage built. They're not encouraging one another. And so we have focused in on that. So we've seen on the ground a lot of people begin to heal in marriage.
Yes.
Second thing, if you don't mind me sharing,
Go ahead.
we begin to encourage women in ministry that come alongside beside their husband, or husbands that come alongside their wives, whichever one may be the lead. We began to call both of them by the same title of pastor, so that they can see each other in the oneness of what God wants to do. And it's not just you go for it and I'll be praying for you, or I'll go for it and you pray for me. It's we go for it. Let's us move together. And so many people had a hard time understanding why I called my wife Pastor Lorna. First of all, as she said earlier, she said, I'm her pastor. Well, she's my pastor. She's really the one who speaks into my life and causes changes to come about. She pastors me, not just preach to me. She won't allow me to have sloppy living. And so she is a pastor to me, but also regardless of how you see yourself, others see you in a leadership role, and you have to embrace where God positioned you. So as we begin to call both spouses by the title pastor, we begin to see that dynamic come together. Each and every time we host any event, if it's a event where there's an opening prayer or scripture reading, we invite both the husband and the wife to stand together in the pulpit, so that I believe it's a level of comfort comes when you have your spouse beside you and you're communicating, and that way you don't have to read lips from the pulpit. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, we do.
There's always that one spouse that's trying to communicate to you while you're in the pulpit, and you cannot read their lips. And so why not just have them beside them? And we watch them grow. We've had testimonies of how that has encouraged them in the ministry. And so I believe as we do that and intentionally, it builds them.
Absolutely. We have seen here in New Jersey, more women step up to embrace the call on their life in these past 4 years than New Jersey's ever seen. Because, and I know that that's attributed to the fact that I'm a ordained minister, and they see me flowing with my husband. And even during this last women's conference we had the ladies that stood up applauding when we honored Bishop about more women in ministry or feeling comfortable to move forward in ministry. They stood up and applauded that they feel that that's what they've seen. And we thank God for that example that we're able to set to show that they can walk alongside their husband in ministry and not be abused or not feel intimidated or whatever, because it's okay. It's okay.
And we've had that on the other end as well, because there are some women who actually pastor the church while their husband is there. And so we've been able to encourage them. And the husband has went forth to get his credentials and to step up alongside his spouse to be able to help. And that has caused growth in their church as they become closer in the scriptures of becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I love that model. It is the priesthood of all believers, and we need our men and we need our women to fulfill the calling that God has placed for them in our lives. And it's all unique. That's one thing I really love about just talking with both of you, is that you get to realize that, and you know this, but when you start to talk about it, it's really awesome when you think about it, because our calling is unique to us, and it's there's no other calling quite like it. And so we're doing ourselves a disservice when we're trying to be like someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I can't preach like T.L. Lowry. I can't preach like Bishop Hill or some of the other, and I certainly can't sing, so I'm not going to try. Be confident in who you are, and I love the synergy that you guys work together as a team, that when you go into ministry, you complement each other, you help each other, you support one another. Our spouses matter and our marriages matter, don't they?
Yes, they do.
That's right.
Yes, they do. I listening to you present your perspective and the model of your marriage. I don't like saying it's a model. It is your life, all right? And so as you share with us your marriage and your lives, it is a beautiful model and a testament to how we should serve as ministers, and more important, just as important, if not more important, minister to our spouses. Now, if I'm a spouse, all right, I'm a spouse and minister in the state of New Jersey, and you're this model pastors in front of me, and I'm thinking, yeah, I agree with them that we should do ministry together, and that we should take out time together. I might be tempted, though, to include our time on Sunday as being time together, our time on Saturday in preparation as time together, our time on Wednesday night or whatever night that we're working with the church. That's time together. Isn't that building our marriage?
Doesn't that count?
Yes, doesn't that count?
That is phenomenal. So I can only be as honest as I can about our life. This is not, like you said, this is not a model. This is our life. And those are things that we struggle with, being together all the time in ministry. I'm a retired military disabled veteran, and my wife has decided to come alongside me, not have an outside job. So we're together all the time. So she actually works for me here in the office. She is what is known as the women's ministry director, as well as the state ministries coordinator, because of her administration skills. She sees things that I don't see. So we're together all the time. And some people can conclude, wow, that is building your marriage time. But no, that's why I set aside time to say, hey, listen, this is what I need from you in order to know that we're separating. It's so funny. We have to balance between home life and ministry life. There's times where I have to look at her and say, honey, we're home. Honey, we're home. She actually made a joke one time. She says, baby, can you build me a sign in the garage so that when I pull up, I can see no more work, I'm home. And so that we actually transition from being in a ministry mind to marriage, and not allow the time that we spend together just to be counted as togetherness, but to be counted as marriage building time.
Yeah. So on Fridays, what we do is we'll plan ahead. Like, what do you want to do this Friday? So we'll go, one of us will choose where we go eat, or where we're going to go, exercise together, because we go to the gym. That's another thing. We go to the gym before we hit the office most days, and we go together for most days. Sometimes, it just depends on what's going on, but we'll go together. So that's our time. My husband has this phrase, GPS. You have to have your GPS calibrated. Your God time, your personal time, and your service time. And so we always have our, our God time together. Every day we'll get up, get our coffee, we'll go have our devotional time with Jesus. And then we have our personal time. Personal time consists of whatever it is you love to do. If it's working out, if it's, having a hobby of some sort, painting, and then what you do for the Lord. All that has to be balanced. Otherwise, your life is going to be, you're going to get to the wrong direction. You're not going to make it to your destination. So your GPS has to be together. So that's what we plan what we want to do. Sometimes we'll go get a foot detox together on Fridays. Sometimes we'll go get a massage. Sometimes we'll go get pedicures done. So, we just do something together that's outside of ministry. And we have this rule, like my husband was saying, we don't talk about ministry, especially in our bedroom.
Wow.
Especially in our bedroom.
Yeah.
It's off limits. Because what the Bible says, the marriage bed is undefiled. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to bring everything into that holy place. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of our rules. And we teach that to all of our pastors' couples. Anybody that's come around us knows that that's a rule that we have, is you keep the ministry out of your marriage bed. We try to say, we actually have a rule. We don't like to talk about it at the house, but especially in your bedroom, you don't want to do that. So, we want to spend time together, not everybody else being in the mix. So we do fun things and call that our marriage time, not going to church, Brother Jeff. So we're doing ministry. And even though we travel and we're in the car together, we're not listening to each other. You need to be able to look at each other eye to eye and talk about real things together. And you can't do that while you're on the go.
Yeah, let me just back up and put emphasis on the fact that we ask each other, is there something special you want to do on that Friday, mm-hmm. so that you understand that you are special, not just together, but to make it a moment of history? Because reality is sometimes ministry speeds up so fast and life speeds up so fast that you can't even remember the moments of your life. Like when I asked her one time, I said, honey, when was the last time we went out together? She had to think, when was the last time we went out together? Even though we're together all the time, you can actually go out to dinner because you need to eat, and that not be considered a marital time of development. So we intentionally schedule these times, and we intentionally ask each other, what is it that you want to do on the next, this coming Friday? Your Friday, my Friday. And so she chooses one, I choose one. That way we have individually said, you met my need, and this is intentional. So we mark those moments so that there's never a question of when was the last time mm-hmm. we slowed down enough to be intentional about building our marriage.
It's on our calendar too. It says our day for whatever. It's a reoccurring event, our day for whatever. So everybody knows.
And that may not work for everyone, but somehow you can't just look up one day and say, we haven't been out. We haven't went to dinner. We haven't went to a movie. Mm-hmm. But even though we're spending all this time together, we haven't marked a moment in our marriage that we can hang our hat on to say we intentionally spent time with one another. We intentionally love one another. Mm-hmm. So funny story, and I know time may be winding, I'm not sure, but my daughter and my wife drove to Atlanta together to visit her father. And they spent 2 days, and then they came back home, and my daughter looked at my wife. She said, Mama, when are we going to spend time together? She didn't see the fact that they had just drove there together as time together. She saw it as we were going to visit Grandpa.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But that illuminated in my heart the fact that I had to be more intentional about these moments and not just say, well, we've been together all week, so I can go and take a break and go golfing, or I can take a break and go fishing because we've been together all week. No, we've been in the presence of one another, but we had not been together. And I wanted to make sure our Fridays were been together.
Love it. Love it. So be intentional with your intentions, right? Whenever you do that, you're together, you're building your marriage. That helps with the conversation. You're very intentional about what you discuss and making sure that you keep the marriage and the ministry separate in a lot of ways. It's healthy boundaries. And so thank you so much there's honestly, we could talk about this for a long time and really unpack a lot of what you guys have said, but thank you so much for being with us. I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of what you guys shared because you both are leaders in our movement and have a lot of respect. And thank you so much for your transparency and willingness to talk about your all's life together, quite frankly. And I love it. And so make sure you get your GPS in line. I love that. I'm going to borrow that, by the way, or steal it, whatever you want to call it. Make sure you get your God time, your personal time, and your service time. One of the things you did put on your, I have to ask this question real quick before we end this section, but Bishop Birch, you put on your bio that you're a UFC fighting fan. Who is your UFC, your favorite? Like, do you have a favorite UFC fighter?
Actually, I don't. It's just whoever's there. But Francis Ngannou, oh my goodness, that guy can knock somebody by looking at him. And so I love if I'm going to make a investment in it, a pay-per-view, that's the one I would, choose because I know it's going to be a knockout.
Gotcha.
So.
I joked with my wife one time that I should join UFC fighting. And like a good, healthy marriage, she told me I was absolutely insane. I was joking, of course. I would get myself killed. You don't want to see me in the ring. I promise you that. That would be interesting, though.
Yes.
Would you pay to see it?
No.
Okay.
No, I would
Well.
not.
So.
We learned a valuable marital process from UFC fighting. These two people go into the ring to try to kill each other, beat each other up, and they fight to the end over one issue. But at the end of every fight, I always notice that they always hug.
Yep.
And I told my wife, no matter how much heated fellowship we have to determine at the end, it's just about the issue, and we need to be good. We need to be good sportsmen and hug it out. And so, while I'm watching UFC, the Lord is speaking to me about life principles and marital principles.
Love it.
Yeah, he did a whole teaching on it on
Yes.
UFC, how to fight fair. It's really powerful.
That's great. And that's another topic for another day, how to fight fair. I think that's a good one. Thank you so much, Bishop Raymond, Lorna Birch, for being with us today. It's such an honor to have you guys with us.
Our pleasure. We loved it. Love it.
Thank you, guys. We're at that part of the show where we talk about our action steps and things to kind of really take away from this episode. And there's really three things that I can think of just off the top of my head. If you're listening, these are three very important things that we need to take away from this episode, in my opinion, among other things. Is number one, we need to be confident in the calling that God has for us in our lives. Know who you are. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you don't know who you are, you will allow others to tell you who they think you are. And then you're going to be dealing with an identity crisis. Know who you are. Be confident in your calling. Be confident in your training and your experience, what God has brought you through. Number two, do you know your spouse? Do you know your spouse's calling? And how do you support that calling that your spouse has? And oftentimes in ministry, it is working together as a team and being there for one another and understanding that supporting the ministry is one thing that's very important, but we also need to be willing to support our spouse and take priority with our marriages. And then number three is a kind of a highlight on that, but be intentional with your marriages and be intentional with your ministry, keeping them separate. Having healthy boundaries between your marriage and your ministry is going to be so vitally important, because so many times throughout ministry, if we're not careful, we will be busy and constant. There's always something that has to get done. There's always another deadline. There's always something else that we need to do. And if we're not careful, before too long, the kids will grow up. They will move out of the house. We're going to look at the person across from the dinner table from us, and we're not even going to know who that person is anymore. We change over time. Ministry has a way of changing us over time. And so know your spouse, continue to talk to each other, continue to go on dates, continue to take care of one another, and make sure that that's a priority. And I would say it's very scriptural that our marriage takes priority over the work that we have at the church. And so be very intentional with your intentions. And with that, we are going to get to the final segment of our show today, and it is the mailbag. And welcome to the mailbag section. And I've got Jeff Sargent, the great Professor Jeff Sargent, looking online at some questions. And Jeff, what question do you have for us today from our mailbag section?
Well, thank you. I don't know about that great part. No one's actually said that. You're the only person in the world who's ever said that. So I don't know what you know or don't know. But
Just trying to be a blessing.
Okay, thank you. I am blessed by that. All right, this listener here has got an interesting question. Actually, we've seen more than one of these, and it's basically centers around this idea. Rather than read it, I'll just kind of generalize. What's it like to actually come to the Center for Ministerial Care and receive the ministry that you offer here? All right, I think, in fact, this listener references what's on the web and listening to us, but it probably... This listener, along with others, are wondering what's it like to just actually come to Cleveland if that's what they choose to do, which, by the way, they're not required to do to come to Cleveland. No. You offer remote services by Zoom, etc. But if you were to come to Cleveland, what would it be like? Because it's kind of a mystery.
It is. And if you come to Cleveland, I know there can be a lot of apprehension, a lot of, because you're like counseling, what exactly is that? A lot of people haven't gone through that process. You are going to be our top priority. We have people come in to Cleveland for counseling. I clear off my schedule, and you are the priority for 2 full days. And so when you come in, we're going to make sure that first of all, we're ministerial care. We're not just ministerial, but we're ministerial care. You're going to be cared for. We're going to try to help you achieve your goals. We're going to try to help you find success in your life, and it's going to be confidential. And we want to, the first part of counseling to me is really being able to establish trust and making sure you feel as comfortable as possible. And that is our job, to make you feel comfortable. And that's what we want to do. And so we have a sabbatical house that you get to stay in for up to a week, a beautiful 3-bedroom home. And so you don't have to worry about the cost of counseling, and you don't have to worry about finding a place to stay. And so that is the mailbag section. Jeff, if there's anything you want to say to close us out today, anything you want to say to our listeners out there?
Thank you for listening to the podcast, and we appreciate your feedback. Please send it to us. It helps guide us as we're trying to make decisions about future podcasts. We want to provide this service for you. So let us know what you think.
Absolutely. And be sure to check out Lorna Birch's book one last time called Leading Ladies. You can find this on Amazon. You will be blessed. If you like what you're listening to today, you're going to want to read the rest of this book. Thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you next time on Pastoring on Purpose.